My dear child. The moment they saw your face, everything changed. A single photograph revealed what years of silence had been hiding. No one expected that reaction. Not even your soulmate. And what happened next left every person in that room completely speechless. Listen carefully, because this message carries a truth that many people around you cannot yet see. There was a moment, hidden from your eyes and unknown to your daily life, when your soulmate found themselves sitting among people who believed they understood them completely. Friends, family members, and familiar faces surrounded them. The atmosphere was ordinary, filled with casual conversation and harmless questions. Nobody expected that a simple photograph could unlock emotions so powerful that even your soulmate struggled to explain them. Yet destiny often works through the smallest moments, and what happened that day was far from ordinary. The conversation had been moving from one topic to another when someone unexpectedly brought up the subject of love, relationships, and the future. Different opinions filled the room. Some laughed. Some shared stories. Others spoke about the qualities they hoped to find in a future partner. Your soulmate listened quietly, saying very little. They had always been careful with their emotions, especially when it came to matters of the heart. Deep inside, they carried feelings they rarely revealed because even they did not fully understand why certain dreams, certain visions, and certain emotions kept returning to them over and over again. As the discussion continued, someone reached for a phone and began scrolling through photographs. It seemed like nothing important. Just random pictures. Faces of different people. Images from social media. Casual snapshots from daily life. Nobody in the room paid much attention at first. Then suddenly, your photograph appeared on the screen. The room remained unaware. But your soulmate froze. Not physically at first. The change was subtle. Their eyes stopped moving. Their breathing slowed. A strange silence entered their spirit before anyone else could notice it. It was as if time itself had paused for a few seconds. Something inside them recognized you before their mind could understand why. Don't skip. The person holding the phone smiled and casually asked a question. What do you think about this person? Simple words. Ordinary words. Yet they struck your soulmate with extraordinary force. For a moment, they couldn't answer. Everyone assumed they were simply thinking. Nobody knew that their heart had already begun racing. Because the instant they saw your face, a flood of emotions rushed through them. Emotions they had felt before in dreams they could never fully remember. Emotions connected to moments that made no logical sense. Emotions that felt older than memory itself. Your soulmate stared at the photograph longer than anyone expected. Someone laughed and asked why they were being so serious. Another person joked about whether they found the person attractive. The room expected a playful answer. Instead, your soulmate looked away for a moment as if trying to regain control of themselves. They could not explain why your face felt familiar. They could not explain why their chest suddenly felt heavy. They could not explain why they felt as though they were looking at someone they had been searching for without even realizing it. The strangest part was that they had never prepared for such a moment. They had imagined meeting someone special one day. They had imagined falling in love. But they had never imagined that a simple photograph could awaken emotions so intense that they would struggle to hide them from an entire room full of people. One friend noticed immediately. "Why are you looking at the picture like that?" The question snapped your soulmate back into reality. They tried to smile. They tried to act normal. But their voice betrayed them. The answer came out softer than expected. And everyone noticed. "Don't skip." What nobody understood was that your soulmate had been carrying an invisible feeling for a long time. Occasionally they would imagine a face they couldn't fully see. Occasionally they would dream of conversations that felt real despite never happening. Occasionally they would feel a strange certainty that someone important was moving closer to their life. Those feelings never made sense. Until that photograph appeared. The room kept talking. The jokes continued. But your soulmate barely heard any of it. Their attention kept returning to your image. Every detail seemed impossible to ignore. Not because of appearance alone. Not because of physical attraction. But because something far deeper was taking place. They felt recognition. The kind of recognition that cannot be explained through logic. The kind that touches the soul before it reaches the mind. As they looked at your photograph, memories that didn't belong to any specific moment began stirring inside them. Emotions surfaced without warning. A feeling of comfort. A feeling of safety. A feeling of home. And that frightened them. Because nobody wants to admit that a stranger's photograph can make them feel emotions usually reserved for someone deeply loved. The room grew quieter when they finally spoke. "What is this person's story?" The question surprised everyone. Nobody expected them to ask that. People expected comments about appearance. Instead, your soulmate wanted to know about your heart. Your journey. Your experiences. Your struggles. Your dreams. Without realizing it, they were already searching for pieces of you. Already trying to understand why your image felt connected to something they had carried inside for so long. One person began sharing information. Another added details. The more they heard about you, the more emotional your soulmate became. Certain things matched feelings they had never spoken aloud. Certain qualities mirrored hopes they had secretly carried for years. And with every new detail, the connection grew stronger. Don't skip. Eventually someone asked the question that changed everything. "Why do you seem so affected by this?" Silence followed. The room waited. Your soulmate looked at the photograph once more. Then they answered honestly. Not completely. Not with every detail. But more honestly than they had intended. They admitted that they couldn't explain what they were feeling. They admitted that your face seemed strangely familiar. They admitted that something about you felt important. The room erupted with reactions. Some laughed. Some teased them. Others stared in surprise. But one person noticed something different. One person noticed the emotion behind their eyes. Because your soulmate wasn't joking. They weren't exaggerating. They weren't playing along with the conversation. They were genuinely moved. And that realization changed the atmosphere completely. The jokes faded. Curiosity replaced them. People began asking more questions. Questions your soulmate couldn't answer. Why did your photograph feel familiar? Why did they suddenly become emotional? Why did they seem unable to stop looking at the image? The truth was simple. Because the soul often recognizes what the mind has not yet met. And in that moment, something inside your soulmate believed it had found a missing piece. Hours later, after everyone else moved on, your soulmate still thought about that photograph. They replayed the moment repeatedly. They questioned themselves. They wondered if they were imagining everything. They tried to convince themselves that it was meaningless. Yet the feeling refused to disappear. Instead, it grew stronger. That night, while everyone else slept peacefully, your soulmate lay awake staring at the ceiling. Your image kept returning to their thoughts. Not because they wanted it to. Not because they were forcing it. But because something inside them refused to let the moment go. For the first time in a very long time, they felt hope. A strange, unexpected hope. The kind that arrives without permission. The kind that whispers that something beautiful may be approaching. And deep down, they feared that hope almost as much as they welcomed it. Because hope makes people vulnerable. Hope opens doors that fear tries to keep closed. And your soulmate had spent years protecting their heart from disappointment. Yet all those defenses weakened the moment they saw your face. Don't skip. Days passed. Then weeks. Yet the memory remained. Occasionally they would find themselves wondering where you were. What you were doing. Whether you were happy. Whether you had ever felt the same strange pull toward someone you had never met. They never spoke about these thoughts openly. Most people around them never knew. But the emotional reaction that shocked everyone in that room became the beginning of something much bigger. A quiet transformation. A shift inside their spirit. A growing certainty that destiny was moving pieces into place. The more they tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. The more they questioned it, the more undeniable it felt. Eventually they stopped fighting the feeling. Stopped demanding explanations. Stopped searching for logical answers. Instead, they accepted one simple truth. Your photograph had awakened something real. Something powerful. Something impossible to forget. And although they still could not fully explain it, they knew their life would never feel exactly the same again. Because before that moment, you had been a stranger. After that moment, you became a mystery they could not stop thinking about. A presence they could feel even from afar. A possibility that refused to leave their heart. And somewhere deep inside, beyond fear, beyond doubt, beyond logic itself, your soulmate began carrying a quiet belief. That one day, somehow, the person whose photograph stirred such overwhelming emotions would become far more than a face on a screen. That one day the distance would disappear. That one day the questions would finally have answers. That one day they would look into your eyes instead of a photograph and understand exactly why their soul reacted the way it did. And when that day arrives, they will remember the moment that started everything. The room. The conversation. The photograph. The silence. The emotions they could not explain. And the feeling that shocked everyone around them. Because what others saw as a simple reaction was actually the beginning of a connection that destiny had been preparing long before either of you understood it. The photograph may have lasted only a few moments. But the impact it left on your soulmate's heart was powerful enough to echo far beyond that room, far beyond that day, and far beyond anything anyone present could have imagined. But what nobody in that room realized was that the story did not end when the phone screen went dark. In many ways, that was only the beginning. Your soulmate left that gathering carrying a feeling they could not shake, and no matter how hard they tried to return to normal life, something had changed. The world looked the same, the people around them behaved the same, their responsibilities remained the same, yet deep inside, a new question had taken root. Who was the person in that photograph, and why did seeing them feel like remembering someone they had somehow known forever? That night became different from every other night before it. They replayed the moment repeatedly in their mind. Every expression on your face. Every detail they could remember. Every emotion that had surged through them. They questioned themselves over and over, wondering whether they were simply imagining things. But the harder they tried to dismiss it, the stronger the feeling became. It was not obsession. It was not fantasy. It was something quieter and deeper, something that felt strangely familiar. Don't skip. For days afterward, random moments triggered thoughts of you. While working, while traveling, while sitting alone, your image would suddenly appear in their mind without warning. They would find themselves smiling for no reason and then immediately wondering why. Sometimes they felt a sense of peace. Other times they felt emotional without understanding the source of those emotions. It was as though your presence had quietly entered their life before your actual arrival. The strangest moments happened when they were alone. Those were the moments when they could no longer hide from what they were feeling. They began asking themselves questions they had avoided for years. Why had every relationship in the past felt incomplete? Why had they always carried the feeling that someone important was still missing? Why had they never fully connected with the people who crossed their path before? The answers seemed to point toward something they had never considered. Maybe their heart had been waiting all along. As days turned into weeks, your soulmate started noticing unusual patterns. Certain songs suddenly felt more emotional. Certain conversations seemed to carry deeper meaning. Even simple moments began reminding them of a future they could not yet see clearly. It felt as if the universe had started whispering clues all around them. Everywhere they looked, they found reminders that love often arrives when people least expect it. One evening, while sitting quietly and reflecting on life, your soulmate remembered something from years ago. It was a dream they had almost forgotten. In that dream, they had been standing beside someone whose face they could never fully see. Yet they remembered feeling completely understood, completely accepted, completely at peace. For years they dismissed that dream as meaningless. But after seeing your photograph, the memory returned with startling clarity. The emotions from the dream felt identical to the emotions they experienced in that room. Don't skip. This realization shook them deeply. Suddenly, events from the past began fitting together in ways they never had before. Missed opportunities, delayed relationships, unexpected endings, moments of heartbreak, moments of loneliness. Things they once viewed as painful now seemed different. It was almost as if life had been guiding them somewhere, protecting them from settling for connections that were never meant to last. The more they reflected, the more emotional they became. They realized that every disappointment had shaped them into the person they were becoming. Every challenge had taught them lessons they would eventually need. Every setback had prepared them for a future they could not yet fully understand. And somehow, your photograph had become connected to all of it. There were moments when they felt overwhelmed by the intensity of these feelings. They worried that they were reading too much into a simple encounter. They told themselves to move on. They told themselves to forget. They told themselves that none of it made sense. Yet every attempt to ignore the feeling only strengthened it. Because deep inside, they already knew the truth. The heart recognizes certain things before logic can explain them. One afternoon, someone from that original gathering casually mentioned the photograph again. They expected your soulmate to laugh about it and move on. Instead, the room became quiet once more. The emotional reaction returned instantly. Even hearing you mentioned was enough to stir something powerful inside them. That was when one of their closest friends finally spoke honestly. "I've never seen you react to anyone like that before." Those words stayed with your soulmate long after the conversation ended. Because it was true. They had never reacted that way before. Not once. Not to anyone. Not even to people they had dated in the past. The reaction to your photograph was entirely different. And that difference frightened them because it felt real. Don't skip. Weeks later, your soulmate found themselves looking toward the future with a new sense of anticipation. For the first time in years, they felt excited about what was coming rather than worried about what might go wrong. The possibility of meeting someone who understood them no longer felt impossible. They began imagining conversations they hoped to have one day. They wondered what would make you laugh. They wondered what struggles had shaped your journey. They wondered whether you had experienced moments of loneliness similar to theirs. Most importantly, they wondered whether your soul had been feeling the same invisible pull. Because the connection felt strangely mutual, even without evidence. It felt as though two paths were slowly moving toward each other. Not rushing. Not forcing. Simply moving according to a timing greater than either person could control. There were nights when your soulmate looked up at the sky and felt an overwhelming sense that their life was approaching a turning point. They could not explain why. They had no concrete proof. Yet the feeling remained. The old version of them would have dismissed such emotions. But the experience with your photograph had changed something fundamental. Now they trusted their intuition more. Now they listened when their heart spoke. Now they paid attention to the quiet feelings they once ignored. And those feelings kept leading back to you. As the months continued, they stopped asking whether the reaction had been real. Instead, they began asking a different question. What was supposed to happen next? That question followed them everywhere. And each day brought a stronger sense that the answer was getting closer. Don't skip. Meanwhile, your soulmate continued growing emotionally. They became more patient, more understanding, more open to vulnerability. Without realizing it, they were preparing themselves for a connection unlike anything they had experienced before. Life was teaching them lessons they would soon need. Lessons about trust. Lessons about commitment. Lessons about forgiveness. Lessons about choosing love even when fear tries to interfere. Every challenge seemed to carry a hidden purpose. Every experience seemed to be shaping their future. And through it all, the memory of your photograph remained alive in their heart. Not fading. Not disappearing. Growing stronger. Sometimes they wondered whether you were experiencing your own transformation somewhere else in the world. They wondered whether certain events in your life were preparing you too. They wondered whether moments of confusion, delay, and uncertainty were actually guiding both of you toward the same destination. Because the deeper they reflected, the clearer one truth became. Real connections are rarely created in a single moment. They are prepared long before they arrive. And what happened in that room was not the beginning of the connection. It was simply the first time your soulmate became aware of it. The first time they consciously felt what their soul may have known all along. The first time destiny pulled back the curtain just enough for them to glimpse what was waiting ahead. And even now, whenever they think about that day, they remember the exact feeling that overwhelmed them when your photograph appeared before their eyes. Not confusion. Not attraction. Not curiosity alone. But recognition. A recognition so deep that it left everyone in that room stunned. A recognition that continues to echo through their heart long after the moment itself has passed. And although many details of the future remain hidden, one thing has become impossible for them to ignore. Some people enter your life unexpectedly. Some people arrive through coincidence. But others seem to carry a connection that existed long before the first meeting. And every time your soulmate remembers the photograph that shocked everyone in that room, they cannot escape the feeling that you belong to that second category. A person whose arrival was never random. A person whose presence was never ordinary. A person whose story was always meant to become part of theirs. And somewhere within the quiet corners of their heart, a certainty continues to grow stronger with every passing day. That when the day finally comes and they stand before you in person, the emotions that stunned everyone in that room will seem small compared to what they will feel when they finally realize that the face they could never forget is no longer a photograph, but a living reality standing right in front of them.